Well, we arrived off Iwo the day before D-Day on 18 February, and that night, unfortunately, we had a collision with another ship, and damage was quite heavy. We took on about a 15-degree list to port, and it wasn't until about 3 days later that landing craft came along our port side. We disembarked and headed for the beach, and in those early morning hours, I had a little bit of a hassle getting my catch-up down to that landing craft, but I did up against the ramp. Went over the side myself. I was carrying a rifle, sidearm, ammo, 2 canteens of water, bedroll. We had to be self-sufficient. And when we hit that beach, I had a little bit of a hassle getting my catch-up and my gear with my foxhole buddy up to our designated spot. Well, we did, and that catch-up came in very handy. It made a fine bulkhead for one end of that foxhole, and later was enjoyed by all the Marines in our unit. Our mission was to guide and direct our aircraft from the offshore aircraft carriers onto targets as selected by the frontline Marine commanders. This is a map of Iwo Jima, small island, about 4 miles long, average is 2 miles wide. That target overlay divides the island into 1/2 mile numbered squares. Each one of those numbered squares is again subdivided into 25 40-yard squares, each identified by the letter of an alphabet. Well, I did that close air support work for the first 6 days, and then when the Marines had pushed the Japanese off of and beyond that airfield, my unit commander, Colonel Vernon E. McGee, great guy, great Marine, later became Vice Commandant of the Marine Corps, directed me to go to that bombed out airfield and get an airstrip in commission as quickly as possible. Well, I somehow got a hold of a small bulldozer and a crew of men, and within 24 hours we landed our first crippled B-29 coming back from Japan. Incidentally, a picture of that B-29 landing is still available on the internet today. A little while later, a C-46 came in and landed. It rolled to a stop, out jumped a woman. Reporter from Reuters news agency. They may not know this, but she was the first woman to land on Iwo Jima during the battle. And as soon as that C-46 came to a stop, it came under mortar fire, which was quite common. I grabbed her, dived for a foxhole. A little later, I got a lot of static from my buddies as to what I was doing with her to that woman in that foxhole. The battle for Iwo Jima lasted a total of 24 days. The island was declared secured on March 13th. During that 24 days, the Marines had put ashore 75,000 men in that small stretch of beach just below Mount Suribachi at the southwest end of Iwo Jima, at the bottom of the chart there. Lee Marvin, the movie actor, was a beach master at Iwo Jima. He was wounded. And of those 75,000 men, we had 30% casualties. It was a fierce battle. On March 13th, slightly before, P-51 started coming in with their support units to supply air cover for the B-29s bombing Japan. And my unit was transferred or staged to the island of Tinian to await our next operation, which was to do the same thing at the invasion of Okinawa. When we arrived at Tinian, the staging point, I needed a drink. And I headed for what was the local bar and walked in. There was Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power introduced himself, very courteous, bought me a drink. I bought him a drink. Tyrone Power was flying the C-46 in support of the air operations in the area. A few days later, we boarded our second troop ship and headed for Okinawa. Incidentally, these maps I show you are the actual maps that I used during these two operations. I saved them. We had a target overlay for Okinawa similar to what I showed you on Iwo Jima. This map shows the landing strategy for D-Day. The landing beaches are circled in red there at the central point of Okinawa on the western side. You'll note that chart is labeled top secret, but it was just declassified. About 4 days before D-Day, Army troops had nullified all enemy opposition on the southern and southwestern islands. The morning of D-Day, my troop ship was the second troop ship in a column of 4, 10 miles off the landing beach to the west there. And in those early morning hours, I spotted a single-engine Japanese aircraft, a Val, headed straight for us, about 4,500 feet. Nobody fired a shot at him. He came in unopposed, did a split S over the number 1 troop ship, one immediately ahead of us, dove into it. The ship exploded, sank almost immediately. All the other 3 of us could do was head for the beach, which we did. The landing was a stand-up landing. There was no opposition at the beach. The Army had committed 5 divisions, the Marines 3 divisions to this operation, and in the first 24 hours, the Army and the Marines put over 60,000 men ashore, and the rest followed shortly thereafter. The Marines were landed on the north part of that landing beach. We were with them. And they headed immediately north. Within a couple of hours, they captured the 2 airfields, Yantan and Kadena, and it nullified within about 3 weeks all the enemy opposition throughout the northern sector. Then turned south to join the Army troops where the main opposition was in the southern end of the island, where the Japanese commanders had chosen to stage their stand. At Okinawa, we did the same thing that we did at Iwo Jima, with the exception that the F-4U Corsair pilots in my unit flew those missions, and we also flew combat air patrol in the F-4U, a beautiful airplane, great airplane. Maybe some of you have flown that little beauty. The battle for Okinawa lasted 80 days. The island was declared secured on June 20th. It was the bloodiest battle of World War II. There were over 1,900 kamikaze attacks during the battle. They sank 32 of our ships and damaged over 350. Total deaths were over 200,000. That included our own deaths, Okinawan civilians, and Japanese troops. Just 4 days before the island was declared secured on June 20th, our overall commanding general, General Buckner, was killed by artillery fire. When the island was declared secured, I was transferred to a communication ship to a unit that was writing a portion of the air operation plan for the next operation, and then Hiroshima, Nagasaki within a few weeks. War was over. We tore up our papers. I have a couple of other slides here you might find of interest. Korean War. This is the TBM or TBF, depends on who made it. Avenger, the same aircraft that the elder George Bush was shot down in World War II. That's me making the 1,000th landing aboard this aircraft carrier. That's not my 1,000th landing. That's the 1,000th landing aboard this ship. I was the air group commander. I had a small air group providing anti-submarine protection for our troops during the Korean War. This is an old beauty, the Mars, very similar to the old China Clipper. I was CO of this outfit. We had 4 of these babies, 2-decker, nice spiral staircase between the 2 decks. We flew passengers between San Francisco and the Hawaiian Islands. Maybe this was in the mid-late 50s. Maybe some of you made that transit with us. In addition to these 4 Mars, I had 11 of these babies. At the time, this was the largest seaplane in the world, the R-3Y. It's a turboprop aircraft, had 8 engines, 2 gas turbine engines in each nacelle, driving counter-rotating props. We could refuel aircraft, 4 aircraft at the same time in the air. We conducted numerous amphibious exercises with the Marines. On the water, a turboprop aircraft multi-engine is very controllable. We could drive that baby right up on the beach, lift that clamshell bow, extend the ramp, discharge or embark troops and military equipment up to small tanks. I made a career out of the Navy, and then after I retired, I went back to school to learn the difference between a debit and a credit. Something probably some of these modern day bankers should have done. And then I ran a small investment banking operation in San Jose for the next 16 years. And then I retired. I want to thank Rick Desane, who heads our computer group. Rick gave me invaluable help with this presentation, the PowerPoint. Thanks, Rick.